if there's no air resistance, how fast can you fall down? There's like a black
Oh,
hole
that's
that
such a good question.
what's the
Okay,
fastest you can go?
this is such a good question. That has a the answer is kind of neat. I don't know. Physics is my weakest subject, but I've had to learn a lot of it because I've taught physics stuff in the past. So I wanted to know this question a few years ago. What is if we had a tower that was like 10,000 feet tall and you jumped off of it? What's the when do you ever stop accelerating toward the Earth? That's a really good question. It turns out that the answer is the same as escape velocity, and that's just so cool. So escape velocity, if you don't know, Xavier, finish this sentence. What goes up
Comes down.
must
Must
come down, right? But the harder you throw something, the higher up it goes before it comes down. But is there a speed where if you launch something, it doesn't come back down? Yes, it's called escape velocity. Now, escape velocity on Earth, I think, is 11 kilometers per second. Um, Let me confirm that real quick. 11.2 kilometers per second. Yep, so there you go. Now, escape velocity is directly, you would calculate that by taking the square root of 2 times the gravitational constant times the mass of Earth divided by the radius of Earth. It turns out, and my friend Blitz would be the one to ask this because he could probably tell you why, but that's also the maximum speed at which Earth can accelerate an object down toward it. So
mm.
that is the fastest possible speed you can fall on Earth.
Also, my next question is, doesn't time slow down the faster you go?
Yeah.
So, you know how they say if we try to go inside a black hole, your body will be ripped apart because the difference in gravity from is so
That's
great.
only for small black holes.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, if you're going into it, wouldn't you go so fast that like time stops, or are you just like frozen and you don't even die? Are you,
So, I mean, we don't exactly know, but so you know how do I describe this? Like you don't feel like if you have those really strong neodymium magnets, you don't feel anything until you get really close, and then all of a sudden it's extremely strong.
Mhm.
So small black holes are the ones that do what you're talking about. It's called spaghettification. But huge black holes, like supermassive black holes, they're so big that any like normal object, it doesn't matter how long it is, because the difference between the head and the feet is just it's so negligible for really large ones. So what happens as you fall toward a black hole is eventually if somebody was watching you, they would see you gradually slow down and then just freeze. That's how I understand it, at least. Whereas you, if you turned around and as you fell into that black hole, looked at the universe, what I've heard is time would speed up and you would basically see all of time unfold right before you fell in. Now, there's some caveats. Um, it probably like it wouldn't literally work that way because your field of vision is limited. Um, and like you maybe would be destroyed in the process and you know, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that kind of if you follow the how do I say this, like in between time and gravitational potential energy between the two spots, that's like kind of conceptually what goes on, like mathematically. Doesn't mean you could literally experience it that way, but there you go.
Also, I remember what I was trying to ask you earlier. How does carbon dating work?
So carbon 14 is radioactive. It turns into nitrogen. There is carbon 14 is constantly made in our atmosphere. What it comes Nitrogen's the most common thing in our atmosphere by far. But also in space, I can't remember if it was Jacques Picard or if it was a different guy, but one of the first guys to go up in a hot air balloon and do scientific research found evidence of these cosmic rays. So what those are is they're basically protons that are screaming through space at very large percentages of the speed of light. And they're literally everywhere in space because they can come from millions of light years away. This has been going on forever in our universe. So the Earth is constantly being bombarded with those cosmic rays, and when they hit nitrogen in just the right way, I don't know how this happens, but it turns that nitrogen into carbon. It turns a neutron into a proton, but it's radioactive. It's not stable. So eventually that proton decays back into a neutron. So that is where the carbon-14 comes from. Now, because it's constantly being produced and the atmosphere is dynamic, that carbon-14 is uniformly distributed throughout our planet. And then what happens is plants absorb that radioactive carbon and it becomes part of them because plants suck up carbon dioxide. That's kind of how they eat in a weird way. And then there are animals that eat plants, and there are animals that eat plants. So every living thing has a certain percentage of this radioactive carbon-14 in us, right? And we get it by living. We get it through our diet. So what that means is when something dies, it stops getting new carbon into its body, new carbon-14, and the carbon that it has slowly decays. Well, we know what the decay rates are for that. Radioactive isotopes all decay at constant rates, despite what people named Jacob, who I destroyed, and he needs to delete his channel, but he hasn't yet. Despite what people like that say, we know that these, we have zero evidence that those decay rates are not constant. So by measuring how much carbon-14 is left in something, you can tell how old it is. At maximum, this really only works for things that are less than about 60,000 years old. Because at that point, there's so little carbon-14 left that you can't tell you can't tell if it's been 10 half-lives or 15 because the percentages are so minute. But there we go.
Also, I have a question about evolution.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, you know how mammals came from reptiles, right?
No, that's a misconception. So the the synapsids, the mammal-like reptiles, it's a terrible name because they weren't reptiles. Mammals and reptiles separated before that. Paleo, are you in here? He knows. He's gonna know more about the specifics of this. Therapsid, you might know this. If you want to come up, you can. But those things called mammal-like reptiles, that's really a bad name because they weren't actual reptiles. Reptiles were around before the reptile synapsid lineage. Here's how it works. This is the line that produced reptiles. This is the synapsid line, and then mammals are a what can I do this with my middle finger? Mammals are an offshoot of the synapsid branch. So our branch is separate from that reptilian one. What were the animals that were common descendants of mammals and reptiles? I'm not sure of them. What were the common ancestors of mammals and reptiles called? Anyways,
And then what do you say? Reptiles came from amphibians?
well, no, not exactly. A true amphibian. So this is kind of like the I want okay, Therapsid's on. I probably said stuff that's not true also. So I'm gonna hand it over to sarcastic Therapsid for this.
Thank you. So the common ancestor for synapsids and diapsids, which we call reptiles, they were called amniotes. And before the divergence of those two, what we have now for modern amphibians, that group, Lissamphibimorpha, I think I mispronounced that, uh, they diverged slightly before that, but the big split between diapsids and synapsids, that was about 312 million years ago in the Carboniferous period. And then after that, along our line, the synapsid line, we get into pelycosaurs, which are going to be your dimetrodons and animals like that, your adaphosaurs, and then slowly down the line you got into the rhapsid group. And that's where you start to see more mammalian features show up, such as a closed secondary palate, so our mucus doesn't flavor our food. Possibly fur. There is some evidence of fur in fossilized dung or coprolites. And then continuing on from there, we have cynodonts. And they have the musculature on their face for whiskers. And they probably had nose leather, which is that weird patch of skin that dogs and other mammals have on their nose.
The PlayStation 2 controller stuff.
Yeah, yeah. The controller stick nose there.
Okay, yeah, cool. And an
And it just goes
amniote,
up from
that's an animal whose egg has an amnion, which now I'm forgetting exactly what that is. But amphibian eggs and the other types of eggs are different.
Yeah, an amnion, that's an egg that it's got a membrane on there that surrounding
Encloses
the
the
egg.
fetus. Yeah.
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 I'm not really good with like the
I'm pretty. Yeah.
in
When your
vitro
water breaks, that's the amnion rupturing. That's what
Yes,
that is.
yes.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask, how come there's only three types of like animal kingdom? That's what it's called, but it's like the eukaryote cell, and the what's the other one? The basal something.
You have your
You mean bacteria, archaea, and eukaryotes?
Yeah.
So that's based on ribosomal RNA structures, genes coding for it, but it's also in the structure itself. So this, if you want to get, this is where it gets very weedy, and there's not a lot I can say about it because this is extremely complicated stuff. But if you want to read a really good book about it, the Tangled, it's either called the Tangled Tree, yeah, the Tangled Tree. Really good book. I think it's by David Quammen. It's about Carl Woese. Carl Woese discovered this like in the 70s. So, what this comes from is fundamentally, like, what am I? Well, I'm a person. I was like, well, but you can boil a person down to something more fundamental than that, right? Yes. I'm not just a human, I'm a mammal, but I'm an animal. But actually, we can boil it down more fundamentally than that. Specifically, I'm a eukaryote. So I'm composed of cells that have organelles in them with specialized structures. Now, we say prokaryotes don't have that. I mean, the real distinguishing thing is that prokaryotes don't have a nucleus. That's really it. But there is actually an organelle that we share with prokaryotes, which would be bacteria and archaea, and that's ribosomes. And ribosomes are like one of the most, like next to DNA, they're one of the most fundamental things. You have to have one, or you have to have ribosomes because that is the bench where RNA is, where the instructions from, well, like literally the RNA molecule is used to make proteins, right? One amino acid at a time to assemble these proteins. What Carl Woese found is that they're called like 14S or 16S RNA protein structures or whatever. I can't remember what they're called exactly, but there are these things that are just fundamentally different. And we knew bacteria existed, and we knew there were eukaryotes. Turns out that bacteria all have these genes very specific for the ribosomes, with like fundamentally that blueprint is there in all life because all life is related, but there's this very specific small unique difference in bacteria. Eukaryotes have a different one, and he discovered that there's actually a third, and it's the archaea. Now they are single-celled like bacteria, but there are the differences in the RNA, or the ribosomal RNA, are there. Also, archaea can live in extreme environments. There are no archaea that can make you sick, so they are not germs. Not all bacteria are germs, but there you go. And they have pseudopeptidoglycan on their cell membranes. A few other things, but so we think that, or I've heard a lot of people. Oh, my kitty's waking up. Hi, kitty. A lot of people think that the eukaryotes are more closely related to archaea, but I can't really give you any particulars on that, like specifics. But like, what's weird about that is thought to have happened with prokaryotic cells. So their bacteria are, or sorry, with bacteria. So bacteria are in us and fundamentally like part of our structure on the inside. But from what I've heard, eukaryotes might be more closely related actually to the archaea. So, anyways, I'll stop. That was a lot.
And I was gonna say, like, I just think it's weird because, why is that the only three options that we have for life? Like, why don't we have like 20 different, because all the eukaryote cells were all related. Like I have a common ancestor with a dog and with a fish, and it all goes back to the eukaryote cell. And I don't know why, like, it doesn't happen again. You know, like, how hard was it to happen?
Well,
Like,
actually, so like you get a eukaryote from now. When it comes to the nuclear membrane, I don't know what that is thought from. I don't know. I just don't know. We do know that chloroplast and mitochondria are bacteria derivatives. Well, not really derivatives. They literally are those things, but they've sort of been reduced to the point where we're now like obligate symbiotes or whatever. But anyways, the the process that was like producing eukaryotic like cells, that probably actually did happen in very slightly different ways multiple times, but one of them outcompeted all of the others, right? And so like there could be like there perhaps could be events where like something like this sort of happens again, but it either gets outcompeted or perhaps through like some weird sort of hybridization, horizontal gene transfer or whatever, they both become incorporated, or like one group of cells, they, how do I say this? They become eukaryotes like in a different kind of way. I'm kind of
That
sounding
would
like an
be
idiot now. But
convergent.
then they just combine with the other types of eukaryotic cells through, becoming a multicellular colony or something like that. And then they whatever structures internally they have just become fused or whatever. So that's possible. I'm
when do
not
we
saying
start?
that's the answer,
Sorry.
but
When do we start mating with each other? Because I know at first it's just like cell division, but when do you have like two different little organisms?
I
Yeah.
can't remember the names of these organisms, but I think the earliest evidence we have of reproduction, I think it goes back 1.8 billion years.
Oh, I have more questions, but I think I already bored you guys.
Oh no, that's ask as many
there's a
questions as you
book
need to.
about this. It's called Dawn of the Deed. Uh,
About
and
2
since
billion.
this is
Yeah,
the
1.8
actual
to
cover,
1.2. So yeah,
but so it's
2. We'll
it's
go
about the
2.
evolution of sex, and the oldest evidence of sex that we've ever found come from these armored fish. Now I can't remember exactly what they're called, but um, pictodontids. There we go. And
Oh,
these are
placoderms.
in the 300 to 4, no wait, it's more than that. These are in the 400 something million year.
Yeah, you're in the Devonian.
Yeah, very long time ago. But what's really exciting about this is these scientists, and they actually found a fossilized umbilical cord within the fossil. So that meant that they knew these organisms were doing internal. They had to have been having sex, because if you have an umbilical cord, the offspring are developing inside you, which means you had to have had sex, right? And so it goes over the fossil evidence of like the first claspers found in these fishes. So there's like sexual reproduction is not the same thing as sex. I mean, like frogs, the female, she lays her eggs and the male just like Is there a PG-13 way we can say this? Well, you can get away with a lot PG-13 these days.
Basically, just crops dusts him with his spunk.
Yeah. There you go. He peanut butters the jelly. That is the eggs. That's actually fitting because the eggs do come out like jelly or whatever. Um, um, he Subway sandwich mayonnaise bottles the eggs that are coming out, right? That is called external fertilization, but that is sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction is two cells uniting, right? Now, in terms of where did sexual reproduction come from? Well, that's something that doesn't fossilize, and how are we gonna figure that out? That might just be too hard of a problem to solve because of how long ago that probably would have been happening. But
Yeah, and of course, the smaller the organism is, the less likely they are to fossilize when you get down to a certain level.
totes.
Which is why we have gaps in the fossil record in some case, because some of those.
He admitted it.
Sup-
Evolution is a religion.
Do you guys
Okay.
think it's do you think it's crazy how the Denisovans died recently?
I don't know when they're thought to have died. Neanderthals, I think it's 40,000 years ago. Denisovans.
Around 30, I want to say, but I might be completely wrong on that. I want to say both Neanderthals and Denisovans were about 30,000, 40,000.
I mean, this is going to sound very strange at first, but weirdly, I think it's probably better that they did because I don't know if any of you guys have ever met a human, but I've met people and they don't impress me. Humans are terrible people. If there were Denisovans, pretty sure what would happen is once we found out through science, genetics, that Denisovans are what they are, there would just be a mass genocide against them.
Oh, we time and we
Yeah.
share 100%
Yeah, we
DNA
do
with
it. Yeah,
ourselves.
humans are terrible people.
You
So,
give someone an actual race to discriminate against.
yeah. So,
Um, and did you guys know? You could fact check me. I think Australians, like the Native Americans, not Native Americans, sorry, the Native Australians. I want to say I think they have like 10% Denisovan DNA. Yeah, fact check me.
I don't remember. That would that would be weird
It's weird.
considering where they live because Denisovans lived like around Europe and Asia Minor and stuff like that. Um, it's possible. God dang it. I read a really good book about human evolution called The World Before Us that really goes into the genetics of Neanderthals and Cro-Magnons and Denisovans. No, wait, Cro-Magnon. Yeah, all three of them. And there is some you you do see a lot of genetic migration of that Denisovan and Cro-Magnon DNA that direction, I want to say, but I don't remember the particular numbers. It's a very hard field of study to keep up with.
Yeah, it changes almost every. It's almost a monthly change. Someone's made some discovery. It's a web.
Yeah. So yeah, that would be kind of weird. I mean, Australia is so weird. Humans like the data we have basically sort of Australia was permanently settled by humans, Homo sapiens at least, like before parts of Europe were. That's weird. Like that's really weird, you know? Because of how far away Australia is and that they would have had to have boated there.